Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Blaze Bell Show. This week's interview gets real, it gets raw and vulnerable as I speak with Denise Cooper. Denise Cooper is a medicine woman who has been leading ayahuasca retreats and breathwork retreats in Peru for nearly a decade now. Today, she answers my questions about addiction recovery and ayahuasca. We get to learn all things Mother Aya, but she also felt really called to talk about her sister's suicide and beliefs she has as she has seen so many people heal and so many people get lost in darkness. This is a really incredible interview, and I hope that you get a lot out of it. Cheers, friends. Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Denise Cooper, an amazing medicine woman. She facilitates breathwork and ayahuasca retreats and so much more. Denise, thank you so much for chatting with us today. Woohoo!
Hi, Blaze. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be
Absolutely.
here.
Oh, thank you. Where are you right now, by the way?
I am in my home in Peru in the Sacred Valley. So you
Oh,
might be able to see the different style roof, and we got a hammock in our living room.
oh
So,
my
and
God.
it's an adobe house. So yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. I did not think you were in Peru right now. That's so funny.
Yeah. Yep.
So I've been getting your emails for a few years now. I think we met, sort of. I did an interview for, I believe it was the Storyteller, Warrior Storyteller program,
Mhm.
and I was one of the guests, and you reached out to me right after and said you thought I would benefit a lot from ayahuasca as, helping with trauma release and some of the things from my past. And anyway, so I started paying attention to your emails, and that's why I thought you were somewhere else right now, because I know sometimes you do retreats in the US and Peru. And so I didn't know you lived in Peru. That's really fun.
Yeah, I've been here since December 2007. So it's
Wow.
been like 13 or 14 years now.
Wow. Very cool. Well, I wanted to talk today. First of all, ayahuasca is just such a fascinating topic. I have not yet partaken, but instead I've just have been like lurking in the shadows, reading about it, listening to podcasts. Um, I think a big part of my story is addiction recovery. And so there's definitely a period of time where I thought, like, does that count as a relapse? Does that count as drugs? And I've actually followed a few kind of popular, influential sobriety people who, one in particular, she's really amazing. Her name is Jenny Sensausi, if anyone wants to look her up. But she ended up saying she wasn't really sober anymore. She's like, well, I'm going to do spiritual medicine work and all of this plant medicine. So anyway, I think that's just an interesting topic in itself, and I don't know that you ever think about that. Um, but there's kind of two camps, I feel, in the recovery world where that's like, no, that counts as a drug, and other people are like, no, 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 that counts as a spiritual experience that is not a addictive day in and day out sort of thing. So I am more on that camp because it seems like a completely different experience that you plan for, and you go to a place and you're guided and you're having this healing experience.
Yes, I actually do have some thoughts about that. And I've never been addicted to anything, and I've never been in recovery. So I can't speak directly to that, of course, from that perspective. But I can share what I have learned over the um, 12 years that I've been working with ayahuasca. It's definitely not addictive. So, and after somebody goes through an experience, a journey, a ceremony, and they puke their guts out, or they have to go to the bathroom, or they cry their eyes out, or they shake, or they get really hot or cold, you're not going to want to do that all the time. And also, too, biologically it's not addictive. But so the thing is that in how we were taught, it's done in a sacred ceremony, it's done with reverence, it's done with respect. The set and setting is completely unlike going to a concert or a bar or a friend's house and doing drugs or or, drinking alcohol or something. It's done so in a ritual setting. So that already has a different feel. And the whole purpose is for healing, is for growth, is for letting go of things. And so from our viewpoint, like, we never call it a drug. Some people call it a drug, and that's like nails on a chalkboard to us, because it's a living being. She's a living being who just, like, you develop a relationship with her, and so she'll talk to you in the ceremony and you get to know her. And so she's not a drug. To us, drugs are pharmaceuticals or man-made synthetic things. She's natural, organic, from the earth, just like we are. And so we call her medicine. Like, it's something that helps to support us. And the plants, all of them, especially this sacred medicine plants and the hallucinogenics, and like mushrooms and peyote and wachuma and all the sacred plant medicines, they're really here to help humanity awaken. And so they are here to remind us of what we've forgotten, of our own innate divinity. And so they are really our allies. And so you know t- from our perspective, somebody that comes into a legitimate ayahuasca ceremony or other plant medicine that's legitimate, it's not breaking their sobriety. It will actually help them to release the the roots of their addiction, of the trauma that's making them need the drugs or the alcohol. So again, though, it's for each person to decide for themselves. Like, of course, we would never try to convince somebody, and it's maybe in the process of their recovery, that's what they feel best and most comfortable with. But it's it's done in such a beautiful, sacred way, and with so much intention and so much love, that it's a therapy and it's a healing session, and people can feel that. Like, it's definitely evident.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing it that way. And I'm in no way trying to convince anyone to do it or not. It's not about that. It's just a question that I've had many times. And
Yeah.
um, but I have quite a few friends who have gone through these journeys, and it's just, again, what you said. It sounds extremely intense. A lot of healing wrapped into one time, and also what you said with the root causes, because if we weren't planning to talk about addiction, but just for one more minute, I don't believe that drugs are the problem or alcohol is a problem. There's a problem in here or in here, and that's just a symptom. That's one of the many things we can reach for to ignore ourself and our deeper needs. So that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I've never once heard someone say like, oh, I'm just gonna go home from work and turn on the TV and do some ayahuasca. Like, that's not a thing. So I yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Well,
Yeah.
cool. Very fascinating. And I'm sure, you've been doing this for so long. You must have seen so many wild experiences and met so many interesting people and facilitated just massive healing. And, one of the things I really want to talk about on this show this year is mental health and different things we can do to heal. And 2020, I think, really amplified a lot of maybe more low-key mental and emotional issues a lot of us were just existing with. And for some of us it was a really healing year, and for some I think it was really painful. Even the healing ones, there was a lot of pain that things just came up. And so I would love to hear, your personal experiences with your mental health journey, or that of people you've been close to, and, any kind of tips and ideas on how to move through that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mental health, it's up this year, right? I don't think there's a person on this planet this year in 2020, and we're still in it, that hasn't struggled with mental health. And that means like feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling fear, feeling hopeless, feeling out of control. Like, there's so much uncertainty that, you can barely plan, like anything. I mean, play date with your kid, like those, like nothing, everything that used to be easy to plan and certain is just not happening. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, my mental health, I have had, luckily, really good mental health all my life. Um, but this last year in 2020, it definitely, I went through the darkest night ever that I've ever experienced. I felt despair and hopelessness and out of control beyond, I mean, beyond anything that I'd ever imagined. And it gave me a good glimpse into what people who experience mental health on a regular basis might feel. And it's awful, it's terrible. And primarily, just a little backstory, the reason why I was feeling that way is because I had just went up to the States to visit my parents for 6 weeks, and I got trapped there. So like, Peru closed their borders, so I couldn't get back home for 9 months, and my husband was here at our house with our cats. And so everything was just, I mean, and I just felt so out of control and trapped, and it was just awful. So that, and I know everyone's experiencing their own version of maybe feeling trapped or feeling out of control. They can't, you know it's so hard to predict the future that you just feel like there's no control. So but yeah, but with my sister, she was 2.5 years older than me, and 8 years ago she killed herself. And she struggled with depression off and on for about 10 years. And the last like 2 to 3 months of her life, she was, we know of 4 or 5 attempts that she tried. And so we were trying to help her, and we were doing all that we knew to do, but she was like a rubber band that had got stretched too thin and couldn't rebound. Um, and at the time, I went to an energy healer afterwards that a friend recommended to me. And he said, oh, yeah, she had like a energy attachment, or a pain body, if you want to call it that, attached to her head. And she did shoot herself in the head. And, it's like, I didn't, at the time, I thought, oh, I don't know if I believe that. And this is a little bit far out there. And, like, I'm not so sure, maybe he's just kind of making this stuff up. But I really feel that oftentimes, that when people feel suicidal, it is another energy that's attached to their aura, to their maybe even physical body, that is giving them negative thoughts that are saying, oh, you're unworthy, you're stupid, you're not good, you're lazy, you just be better off not here. And then they start isolating more because they feel bad. You start feeling really bad about yourself. So so it's important to know that, I think that there are ways to help people, um, from an energetic spiritual lens, and it can get really down to the root, instead of, and I'm not saying that, I think all modalities have their place, and they all help people in different ways in different times, and it's kind of like a recipe, or getting at something from different angles. And so, there's really not one that's better than the other. But with like suicidal energy, I think that, addressing it from an energetic point of view is helpful.
Whew, wow. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you and your family all experienced that, and your sister, and that's just heartbreaking. Um, so how does one remove this dark energy? I do believe that, and I've seen that more, like, again, back to me, no, but just back to like the recovery world and addiction. And I know, and I've heard this before, and I've had glimpses of it when I was in really dark places, of um, sometimes us opening ourselves up way too much when we're doing a lot of drugs or drinking, and being open to darker energies. And it's scary. And again, it's probably going to be really a little out there for some of the people listening to this, and that's fine. But what would you recommend? Like, how can people work through this? I know I have some like cord cutting and protection bubble, like grounding things I try to do. But I'm not sure that would be enough. And maybe it is, but I like what would you do? Or have you met anyone since then that you could tell that that might be their issue and had some ways to help them?
Yeah. So the best way to do it, I mean, definitely cord cutting and meditating and putting yourself in your own energetic bubble. Those are all great. And grounding yourself and, imagining a golden light around you. Also, too, I really recommend declaring out loud and saying, I choose life, I choose vitality. And that's something that I had to practice like about 5 times in 2020 because I could feel like just this death energy, this darkness, because it was just so intense. I mean, it was just, yeah, I was like, it was like tidal waves. And so I knew that like this heaviness that I could feel around me was not me. And so I just was like, I'm making a declaration. I would just say it silently to myself. I choose life and I choose vitality. It's bad now, but it is going to get better. And it did. It absolutely did. And, we all need help. Every single person on this planet needs help. I don't care if you are an advanced, whatever, everyone needs help. And so I would reach out to my group of people that help me heal and help, work on me. And so the thing is, though, I would suggest finding a person that does energy work and does this specifically. It's something that I'm starting to work with more and more. And it's a refined skill, and it's one that takes a little bit more practice. And so I'm getting there. I've been practicing um, with this for about the last year, but I don't recommend myself yet, but I will. I'm getting there. But yeah, I have a couple of people that I would recommend. And also, but as well, I mean, you could flat out ask somebody that is doing energy work, do you help remove pain bodies, dark energies that are connected to suicide? So you could just flat out ask them, like, are you able to see energy and help remove it? And the one thing too is that, you know, using amusement, this is something too, like in your own personal life, like um how also these energies really attach to us is when we get super serious or super, intense. And so one thing to keep in mind is amusement. So knowing that you have sovereignty over your body and your energy field, and that nothing can come into your space without your consent. And how do we consent to that? So we consent to that because we feel shame, we feel guilt, we feel unworthy. And so whenever those negative thought forms are within us, then those other energies can come in and hook in. They're like, oh, you feel guilt, you feel shame, you feel not good enough. So we're gonna feed that. So what you can do is you can just um, you know, reclaim your space, choose life, work on your unworthiness, work on what you feel shame about, work on what you feel guilty about. So that's kind of some long-term things, but just to know that that negative thought, negative energy is not you. So that's one way you can start to reclaim your power. And I will say too that this is not always a quick fix, right? So like there's a reason why this is happening to you, to whoever. It's a journey and it's a process of digging down and coming into a space of like, wow, like, I really don't love myself that much. And so you have to start doing things that are loving towards yourself, like maybe eating well or getting movement, or, like not doing exercise because you want to be thin, but doing exercise because it feels good for your body and it's loving to do that. So I mean, it's a journey and it's a process. And um you have to also take accountability for your stuff as well, and of course, it doesn't mean that we can't, like, I'm a big advocate of not bypassing our hard emotions, and especially not spiritually bypassing. So a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I don't want to be a victim. Yeah, of course you don't want to be a victim, but maybe that's where you are. And maybe you are really fucking pissed off that your parents neglected you or abandoned you or abused you. And that needs to be felt and processed. And so, like, um, and there is a way to go into that without being a victim, but sometimes we just feel like a victim. And I think that people have a right to feel what they feel and know that they will move out of it when they're ready, and that they will take responsibility for their part now, like as an adult. Okay, that happened to me as a child and it was awful and horrible. And I've been spending the last year or 2 years of my life healing this, but I'm ready now to heal and take responsibility, and I'm ready now to forgive my parents. And maybe that takes 5 years. So I just want to, like, I think so many times we try to rush through it and like, oh, it's so painful. I just want to feel better. I just don't want to feel this heaviness and this, anger and this grief and this rage. I just want it to be done. And so it's just important to know that sometimes it takes a little while.
So I think that one of the big things that's so important to know that I've learned is this idea that not every thought we think is true, and not every thought we think is ours. And, whether it's this dark energy from outside of us or just the habit of talking down to ourselves, or, the verbal abuse from a family member or friend or whatever that we've taken on as our identity, that none of that is true, and that doesn't have to be true. We get to rewire our brains. And so I just think that's really important. Like, I didn't know that until I was well into my adulthood, and someone just offhandedly said, well, not everything you think is true, right? I'm like, what? Like, why didn't anyone tell me that? So maybe I was just super naive, but I think a lot of us go through that, where it's like, oh no, this thought came in that I'm not good enough. This thought came in that I can't do this thing. And it's like, no, that's probably your ego or just a part of you that is trying to protect you. And they don't know what you're doing because you're trying to do something new, but you're just reading a poem in front of a classroom. Like, it's going to be okay, or whatever it is. So anyway, I just think that that sentiment alone can be such a huge perspective shift for all of us mentally, and give us a little relief. You're just like, oh, like, what a relief that I don't have to believe every weird thought I think. Or,
Yeah.
I think that's huge. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and everything you're saying, about these different ways that we can do this work on ourselves. And I think that's so important. And so this year, I've been working with a coach who's a hypnotherapist. And so we do a lot of hypnotherapy and a lot of tapping, which I also think is a very energetic practice that can just keep clearing things. And I also talk to myself a lot. And, you're talking about like these entities are declaring, your own sovereignty or your own independence or whatever it is out loud. And I've done a lot of that this year. And it's a practice I already kind of had low key. Like, I'm sure anyone driving next to me is like, let's hope that girl has the radio on because she's just going on. But I think it's really important to, when I have those dark thoughts, and I've never been really depressed. I did have postpartum depression for about 2 weeks, which sounds like such a short amount of time. But in that 2 weeks, I remember thinking like, oh, this is depression. Like, I've never felt that before. And I haven't since, thank goodness. But it was something totally different than any of the like sadness I've experienced or anxiety. It was just purely hopeless. And so I have a tiny bit of that like empathy, but really not a lot. Like, I really just don't know, and wouldn't pretend that I do. But I do know that I have thoughts come in that suck all the time, or just like are you sure? I don't think you should do that. It's a lot of like, let's not do that. It's too big, it's too bold, it's too much. Don't say this, don't say that, and it can be exhausting. So that tapping helps a lot for me. And
Yeah.
then just saying like, thank you for trying to protect me. I don't need you. Bye. It's just like,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to go now.
Yeah.
You can't make my decisions because you're only based on fear. And that's not what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I was also going to say like like EMDR, hypnotherapy, breath work, all of like anything that gets to the subconscious is awesome to help get to the root of these patterns. And also to talk therapy, like I did a lot of talk therapy through 2020. And it really helped because it helped me slow down and feel. It was more like inner child work, so it helped me slow down and feel like, oh yeah, like when I was 5, when I was 7, when I was 8, 9, like that hurt me, like that didn't feel good, and I just need to sit with that for a second because I just glossed over it because it was too painful to feel it. So I mean, and I like probably 10 years ago, I'd probably say like, oh, I'd never go back to talk therapy, but it just was right in that moment. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, I agree with all those things. I definitely, for me personally, energetic work, that hypnosis and EMDR and tapping, those all seem to work for me a lot, like about light years faster than talk therapy. But again, I will say the same thing. Like there was one point in my life where there was this certain therapist and I just loved him. And it was what I needed for 6 months or whatever. It was like the best to be able to just get everything out to someone outside of my bubble. And, so there, it all depends on, I guess, what part of your journey you're at. But it's exciting that we have access to so many of these healing modalities and virtually. The coach I'm working with lives in a completely different state. It's all on Zoom. It's all, so I think that also takes away a lot of excuses that we may have had, or our elders may have had, that like they can't access it. It's like, nope, you can. Click of a
Mhm.
button. So let's get to it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the inner child work, and that's been another thing I've been diving into this year. And just recently, one of the things I was realizing was that I'm super hard on myself. And again, fears come up from the past or new things, that are related to these old fears that just haven't completely healed. And I would just get so frustrated at my own, at myself. It's just like, oh, I can't believe you're still afraid. I can't believe you're still this and that, and so then I'd add a layer on top of my fear of just being mean to myself. And, and somebody said, well, like, what would you do if that was your daughter that was feeling afraid? What would you do if it was you as a little kid feeling afraid? Would you yell and say, how you're so stupid for feeling afraid? Like, no, of course not. Like, I would hold them and nurture them and just listen and be there. And like, how can I just love on you right now? And, you know, so I actually made my phone screen, my lock screen on my iPhone, a picture of me as a little kid that happened to pop up. And I was like, oh, and it just became this really cool reminder for me because I look at it all day long. That's another problem for another day. But, just to be able to have that reminder 30 times a day of like, how would you treat her? Because that's who still needs you. And we're not going to get frustrated with ourselves every time, So that's been a kind of cool thing that came out of the blue, but it has softened me so much. And the kinder I've been to myself, the nicer I've been to the people around me, I noticed too. Like, not that it wasn't nice, but I was definitely harder on people because it was just
Mhm.
bleeding out from my own like pressure I would put on myself, So
Yeah, absolutely. And the judgment that we feel like, judging our emotions, judging our pain, judging our fear, judging that we're not through this yet. I mean, it just keeps us stuck there longer. And so, yeah, like what you're describing is the best way to navigate through it is just to be soft and gentle and kind to ourselves and being like, yeah, I still feel hurt, or I still feel angry, or I still feel completely broken and unworthy, but I'm getting better. I just maybe can't see it. And yeah, I mean, that's such a a huge thing not to judge where we are and how we feel.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so just to kind of wrap up with the mental health aspect, and thank you for sharing all of that about your sister. And that's just hard. And I think though that hearing about that from you could be really helpful. So if there's someone listening to this right now who is dealing with depression and maybe dealing with suicidal thoughts, like what would you tell them, or do you have advice? I mean, obviously you just gave a lot of advice and a lot of ideas, but just maybe any message.
Yeah, I mean, so the number one thing is everything within them is saying, don't tell someone, isolate, close down, so the biggest thing is to tell someone you trust. And so whether that's a close family or close friend, so reaching out to somebody to get help. And so I've heard somebody describe it as they were in a dark bag, like a dark trash bag, and they just couldn't even think to call or whatever. But I mean, if you can summon energy to find help. And then from there, just really try to reach for whether it's energy work or some sort of program, or if it's meditation, but just something that can help to get you on a path to reconnect with yourself. And everybody's journey is going to look a little bit different. So there's not one way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. And I definitely will make sure I have the links to your website and retreat information. And, I thought 2020, it was planning to be a big year of travel, and then all my trips got canceled. And so I am so ready for when things when travel is back open. I don't know about things going to normal, but when it feels safer to travel again, I'm so excited to do all the things, including a retreat with you. I think it would be totally amazing. So thanks again, Denise. And I just really, really appreciate the work that you're doing in the world. It's amazing.
Thank you so much, Blaze.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Let's continue this conversation in the comments, and for more healing resources, please visit blazebell.com. You are worthy, you are loved, and I am so, so grateful for you. See you next time.